Good evening, and thank you for coming tonight. We're really excited. This is the first time I think we had so many stars on one stage. I'm backing myself off. I'm looking to my military right, there's Max. I'm looking to my military left, and there's Frank. I said, oh, wow, there's just too much star power here. But again, thank you guys all for coming. If you can just indulge me for a couple of seconds to just let you know what's coming up. We have the rotating gallery downstairs has the Art Oasis. It's going to be now through March 16th. Very, very unusual art and great. I mean, they're all local people, and please come down and support them and give a look. February, we have the another coffee and conversation on the third Thursday of the month, and it's going to be about the Florida Maroons and the Black Seminoles. That always seems to get a lot of people going because Central Florida was a central place where the Seminole Wars were fought, especially the second one. And the doctor from University of Florida has got a lot of great information, so please come back on that one. We have a date night coming in February. Now, I know I shouldn't say this, but guys, please be aware. Whatever's going on for Valentine's Day, take care of your Valentine, whoever they may be. But at the same time, if you want to be something different and also support the old courthouse, come on in on Friday, February 10th at 6:30. Lindsay and Andrea made arrangements to bring something called wine. And then, you'll be able to sit and relax. And then from 7:30 to 9 o'clock, there is going to be a real artist who's going to give you some pointers on how to do your love drawings. Now, don't go too crazy on it. With the love drawings are, like hearts and, good stuff, nothing crazy. But so we have that going on. And then, if I can remember, then on February 16th, a couple of days after Valentine's Day, we have the Dave Cap Project. They were here about 4 years ago, and the lead singer, the lady, is just incredible, has an incredible voice. And then you have a sax, drums, and a piano background. On the keyboard, just incredible. Just come on back, and I know some of you bought season tickets, so please continue doing that. Thank you. Let's see here. Okay, tonight, you guys are all here for Max and Tom. And being a typical star power, Max make sure to give me his biography. So I have to say that Tom, I'm sorry about that one, but at least I know that you worked with Tom on the books and on the hiking, biking, kayaking in Citrus County, and they are a great seller. Thank you guys for that. But again, the other gentleman that's up here. He pulled rank on me. I'm only an E4, but he was a U.S. U.S. Air Force colonel. He has had tours in North, Central, and South America. He was in Europe, Asia, Pacific, and the islands. He's been to warfare schools, land and sea survival courses. He retired in 2012 to Inverness. And then in his spare time, he only does a little bit of a licensing of community association manager and consults on community developments. And of course, his biggest deal is the environmental issues. And part of it is when he first went out on the hiking, biking, and kayaking, there's something we can do. So I give you Tom and Max tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. First, the disclaimer comes up front. Despite the fact that we've done 3 and we're working on a 4th book, neither Tom nor I are expert hikers, expert cyclists, or expert kayakers. I started writing this book as the first one as a novice's guide, and Tom wouldn't let me use that title. So by way of background, Tom was a professional motorcycle racer. He was in the graphic arts business, and he had some absolutely great contracts. National Park has stores. For a while, he had 41 stores in every place you ever wanted to visit. And graphic art is one of those that has taken a serious tumble in the United States due to overseas unfair competition. So he ends up, many of you will look at him and go, I know him. Yeah, he's the pharmacist assistant at CVS, and he's the knowledgeable, most popular guy I know. So, and if you don't believe me, ask Frank DiGiovanni. As he said, I'm a guy who got drafted in the very last draft in 1970, started serving in 1972. I did 26 years wearing a uniform. I flew jets and did intelligence, and because I got to go everywhere, I got to see a lot of things, and because I'm a curious person, when I got done at the end of 40 years, because I did 14 for the Defense Intelligence Agency, I came back here. I started buying land here in the 1970s, and my in-laws were here. So I love the place, but when I got back, I found myself with diabetes, a couple of other the kind of conditions when you live what we call the rubber chicken circuit in the political military affairs world. A couple extra pounds, some diabetes, and the need to get out. And then I started working on the condominium that I live in, association on the board, and ended up as the president. And for about 5 years, it eats 6 to 10 hours of your day every day. So you have to have something to do. And to get better on that, I started walking in the woods. And what I found was there was not very much written about Citrus County. You could find all sorts of things, 10 books on every trail in Tampa, 20 books on every trail in Orlando, but nothing on ours. So I started collecting things and trying to find every trail I could, making notes, taking pictures, and about 3 years into that, with the intent of writing a book, I'd been in touch with printers and everything and got my rejection notices, and Tom shows up, and the first time I talked to him, I knew that we were going to get these books done. So as you will see, I hope, and on the break, the paid political announcement is, we're going to take a break. We don't normally, but we'll do sort of an intermission, number one, because the gift shop's going to be open, and they sell our books. They sell a lot of other books, too, and they make a 50% of what you pay for the book, so it helps the Treasury for this really worthy organization. Also, there are some, we put on every table a little flyer that was actually an article for Nature Coaster on the display that the butchers, both Clyde and Nikki Butcher were here. They left a display here that ran for 2 months. And they sell calendars. He is the most famous black and white photographer in the world, so it's a chance. There's just a very few of them left. If anybody wants to get a keeper calendar, look at them online and you'll see how much his things sell once they get just a little bit old. So. I can tell you a little bit about how we wrote the book, just the methodology, and I just told you why we wrote it, the combination of do something after 40 years and when you're first retired, but also because there, in my opinion, there was a need, and I talked to Frank and Eric in the city office, and they said they'd help, and I talked to Ardith down in the Chamber of Commerce, and we got a lot of knowledge help to get this thing going. We got a grant of $1,000, not huge money, doesn't cover publishing the book, but defrayed the risk enough on each of those books. Our third book, which actually was the runner-up for Best Outdoor Sports book of the year 2019 that Tom did with a 40-year fish and wildlife guy, actually was, like I said, was a runner-up award winner, but the sales didn't warrant another printing, so right now it is out of print. We're working it to come in another way to be able to bring it out. So the methodology we use on the books is to take the hydrology and the geography of the county, and it's a major factor. It's in Florida, it's always a major factor. Water is a major factor, and then when we have land, especially if we have high land, that's important. So you see the distinct regions of the county, the coastal basin, which is essentially 19 west, the Withlacoochee Basin, which is essentially 41 East, and then what is called the Brooksville Ridge. And it's a ridge that runs from the Green Swamp all the way up about 100 miles from here. But it's some of the highest, it's 70 feet, or 70 meters actually, which is some of the highest land in the state, which has given us very distinct, excellent offshore fishing, excellent kayaking out in the Gulf, wonderful bass fishing, wonderful kayaking, canoeing along the Withlacoochee all the way from the Green Swamp, and then some really good hiking in the forests. The Withlacoochee State Forest is recognized to be among the least disturbed of the forests you can go through. So it's great hiking, and we bring a lot of people, and a lot of money comes up here. A lot of volunteer work gets done up here. What you see there are on the map is the icon for hiking, for biking, and for birding. And more than not being an expert hiker, I am not an expert birder. We see birds and birding as, like anything else, a hobby or a science that you have to get more serious about. But for hikers and for kayakers, it is the spice that makes a meal taste good. And in the age of citizen science, where there's some really good software that will tell you by sound or by picture what a bird is, and when you can feed back to the Audubon Society what you see, everyone has an opportunity to contribute to understanding the well-being of nature, and particularly our birds. So we included all those places where if you go, you're going to encounter birds, and we offer some of the samples of the kinds of birds that you'll encounter. I tell people, when I first started, I was actually writing this as a recruiting book with the motto, if your best friend from high school is still back in Ohio or Michigan or New York, you're not a very good friend. To try to get the right people to come down here, people that appreciate the nature, the wildlife, the fact that it's not overcrowded, but who are good citizens, who volunteer, who pay taxes. And I thought it was a really good idea. So we set it up so seniors could hike, and seniors could walk, and seniors could ride bikes. And if they are seniors who haven't done those things in a long time, there are ways to ease on into it so that you can develop all the expertise you want safely. But when I talk to my daughters, I've got a 52-year-old and 48-year-old that I particularly talked with about the book. They said, Dad, you're nuts. You missed the boat again. What you need to write for is women between the age of 35 and 55 that still work, who go on girls' weekends, and they want to come from Tampa and Gainesville and Orlando, and they want to go someplace where they can park their car safely, walk for an hour in each direction, come back and their car will be there, then the next day come back to the same place, and then find themselves in the evening in a non-chain, whether it's a hamburger joint or a spaghetti joint, where they can get an inexpensive beverage and not be bothered. And it was like, wow, we have all that here. We can draw that crowd, and that is a group that has money and that deserves a lot more respect than they're getting. So we set things up that way.
My name is Tom. So I met Max back in 2015, and he had the lanai on at his house was full of boxes, and they were full of maps and digital discs of photos, and he asked me to collate them and put together the book. So he's the publisher and I'm the producer. So when we started looking through all these maps, you notice that some of these are black and white, some of them are hand done, and a lot of them are based on what we didn't understand what they were based on. Because some of the trails, like in Potts, well, actually, there was a hike the other day and everybody got lost.
Potts Preserve is right down at the end of Turner Camp Road, a beautiful campground on the river, and a wonderful place to just go out for a picnic.
So my experience is as a designer. I owned a couple of companies. One had retail stores around the country. And I was the art director for Reebok T-shirts division for 5 years, and then moved on to Puma for 7 years. When they first started in the United States, Paul Fireman bought the company from the British company and started Reebok International in the United States. That's when I started with Reebok. And then went on to resorts and sold T-shirts that say the name of the resort. And then moved on to national parks, and that was my favorite part. As I was ending my career, I got to go to all the national parks pretty much in the country and have my partner pay for my trip so that I could come up with designs. So that was a dream job. But we put together this book in about a year, and it took Max about 2 years to put it all together. And when we started out working on the book, Max said, "You've got to go on every trail." So I went and started hiking on all the trails, and it was good. It gave me experience, but I also loved the trails.
And I will tell you, when he got here, a lot of them were a stretch, and it was the same with paddling when we started on the next book, and now I can't keep up with him either hiking or paddling. So you can grow into this if you haven't done it for a while. By the way, I should also say his love of the national parks has resulted in one of his two sons being a park ranger, and he's assigned to Mesa Vista, but he's always someplace, so it works good. So we brought the book out in 2016, and we just did a second printing on it. We've probably sold about 1,000 books, which is not a lot, but when you're concentrating on only and you don't make any money on that, I assure you. But when you concentrate on Citrus County, it's not a big audience. However, we try to talk in the libraries, every library once a year, and it keeps selling steadily. It's a good recruiting tool. The realtors are interested in it, but mostly when folks get here, and not just people that want to go hike, they end up with a copy either by going to the library, because we put 5 of each book so you can go get them at the library and look at them, or by buying them. But we did not do those things and the hotels have a big stay in tourism here. The grants that we got were from a fund that comes out of the hotel bed tax. So one of the things they said was, hey, you didn't cover the places that are right over the borders that are not in Citrus County, but if you're visiting here, if it's somebody's company, they may take them down to Chinsigat. If you go down Pleasant Grove Road, right where it hits 41, there is an outstanding birding area that has a nice trail. It has what used to be a duck blind, but it's now a bird blind, so you watch birds instead of shooting them. And the Hernando County Audubon Society once a quarter runs an introduction to birding, 3-hour-long field lecture. That's a great way to learn about it. So basically, if you're heading into Levy County, there's a Gulf Preserve up there. If you're heading up to Marion County, first of all, you're going to see on the Denellen side, we've got a connector trail that takes you over, but you're also going to see, let's see. Yeah. Okay. You're actually going to get into the Florida National Scenic Trail that's being developed, and the Florida Greenway. We'll talk some more. Tom's going to talk about that book we're working on. But also there's Antigua. If you go down, whether it's called Citrus Ave down at one end or Lecanto Highway, once you cross the county line, there are some fairly dense forests with some steep hills that actually has a Native American quarry that went out of service about 400 years ago. Let's see, across when you're going on Sumter, he talked about Potts Preserve. That is on the north side of 44 on our side. If you go on the other side, there's Half Moon. So almost every place on our border has a sister park or trail system that belongs to our neighboring county. And in the world of biking, and this book is, in honesty, ends up being a 50% hiking book, 60% hiking book. But we are a trail city. We have a strong biking trail community, and we continue to grow the mileage we have. We're at the center of a 47-mile-long trail in the southern part of the county, and it now connects to the Denellen Trail, which is a beautiful bike trail. And we just had, last year, the addition of the Suncoast Trail extension. So a lot of folks cursing the highway, the Suncoast Highway extending, but if you don't know about the Suncoast Trail, it starts down at the very tip of Pinellas County in St. Pete. And it comes, right now it comes all the way up to 44. So you can do 2 or 3 days of riding just on that. It is also part of a C2C, a coast-to-coast trail that takes you 240 miles over to the Kennedy Space Center, really, at Titusville. You go up on the bridge over to Merritt Island, and Tom and I did it during COVID just to have something to do. We did it in pieces, but it's still a work in progress. It's about 80% complete, and they're fixing the trails. The state has spent $1 billion in the last 5 years doing connectors, and it's going to be eventually 5 trails that go from the Gulf to the Atlantic, and 2 super trails that come, one all the way down, paralleling 95, not anywhere near 95, but paralleling it, and one paralleling 10 and then 19, so that you'll be able to bike camp if you want, tow your little trailer, throw a backpack and a sleeping bag, and do that. So the meat of the trails are, for us, are in the citrus tract of the Withlacoochee State Forest. And this is the particular area where I sat down and did exactly what my daughter said, of finding places you could park where a good walk will take you, you know, an hour at whatever you do. For most people, that's 3 miles generally. So out and back, it'd be a 6-mile hike that you ease into. And there's 4 loops on that trail. It's a 46-mile total loop. The 4 loops are roughly 15 miles each as a loop, but the outside perimeter is that long. But it also has something very important. And again, we're not expert hikers. We're not the really seasoned folks. The really seasoned folks pretty much don't take time to write books. They do things like the Appalachian Trail, which will soon be the East Coast Trail. The Appalachian Trail currently runs from Georgia to the Canada-Maine border, the Pacific Crest Trail. There's 11 trails that have the status of National Scenic Trails, and one of them, 1,400 miles long, is the Florida National Scenic Trail. It cuts right through our forest. It cuts through Whispering Pines Park. It goes along the Withlacoochee State Trail, which is a multi-purpose trail, but primarily a biking trail. And it connects all the way up through the Greenway to Palatka, and then heads back all the way to Apalachicola. Now, that's our National Scenic Trail. There are folks that do the whole bunch. We happen to have a guy in the crowd tonight, a trail named Dusty, who just finished doing the 2,100-mile Appalachian Trail. And yeah, so, but part of what we do is we'll get feedback. I'm interviewing him. He's already agreed to do it. We'll be tweaking pages, and we'll be incorporating that in our next book, because especially when it's a local guy, when it's somebody that was a county employee for a long time and has been a longtime member of the Florida Trails Association and is known to everybody just as Dusty, it's a really nice thing. And you can be part of it. Not everybody in their life is going to walk 2,100 miles or even 100 miles, but when you get out there, when you first go a mile, and then a year later you're going 5 miles, and 2 years later you're going 10 miles, it's a great feeling, and it's actually good for your health too. So the other thing right there, and I'm really glad to see Frank DiGiovanni here, because He started his long career here in the city at this park. He came from a park up in New York, and what you see, what that grew into was his visions that he lived with when he was running the park, and then also when he was the city manager for over 20 years. And, you know, it is, if you walk onto the paved trail, you can get in the back entrance a mile from here. There's 5 different trails besides the cut through. You're never far from water. You're never very far from a bathroom or shade. And it is a wonderful city park that's well worth doing. So, and that is the map. So we can't, there's not enough time nor probably interest to do it this way, to go through the 24 different hiking areas that we talked about. But, and I tell everybody, they say, what's your favorite trail? Or what's your favorite place to paddle? And it's whatever I'm doing that day. We are really blessed in this county with, some of it isn't natural. A lot of what we have is folks that in the 1880s that dug canals so they could bring barges up here to take oranges and fish out. And then realtors that in the 1950s took some of those canals and widened them to build houses on them. And mostly swift mud that has put in a lot of cement to separate the land from the water so that we've got more places to have houses, but it also means we got more place to hike and to bike and to kayak. And they get a bad rap, but they do an awful lot to protect property and create recreational areas for us. Our slice of the bike trail right there, I will submit to you, is and I haven't done every bike trail in the state, but we've gone all the way to the east side in three different places and gone all the way down to the bottom of St. Pete, and I live down in the Miami area, bike down there. We have the prettiest section of trail. We've got 10 miles of trail that starts in Hernando, maybe 13 that ends in Floral City, where you're looking at lakes, you're looking at horse farms. Because the trains have stopped running, the trees have grown over the trail, so you're riding in shade, which means in the summer it's 5 degrees cooler. When it's raining, you get a little protection. It's just beautiful. And it's got stops along the way. Again, not all of them have restrooms. That's something we're hoping the county's going to work on. But enough of the places like here and in Floral City and up in Citrus Springs and finally in Denellen have those. And it's a very flat trail, and it's a very forgiving trail, so that if you make the decision of, you know what, I haven't been on a bike in 40 years, but I'm going to get back to it. Or if you got young ones that haven't been on a bike at all, and they're coming down to visit, and you want them to leave with a memory, this is a great place to cycle. On the other hand, in the estuaries are incredibly important from an environmental perspective. Much of the important fish and wildlife that people come here to fish or hunt, especially out in the Gulf, starts in the estuaries. They depend on spring water to keep them alive. But the salt marsh is an essential part of that layers that bring you back through hammocks into forests and into where we are. It's a short series of trails. One's a half mile, 2 of them are 2/3 of a mile. There is a really beautiful viewing tower. It's not real tall. 2 flights get you up about 14 feet. Viewing of the salt marsh all the way to Battle Creek. And it is between Chaz and the river on Mason Creek Road. And you have to really know where it is. The sign is about this big, and it's a natural wood with a light yellow painting. It's almost like we don't want you to come here. But then when you do get there, you'll find a wonderful pavilion to sit for a picnic lunch and a beautiful place to view salt marsh. It's not quite as good as going, down to Corkscrew to see the Audubon one, but it's right here. And then finally, Potts Preserve is one of the wide open places. It used to be a cattle ranch. There's a lot of sandy dirt trails, but along the river trail is heavily foliated. With the exception of a large hog population that tears up the trails, there's not much out there that isn't just beautiful to see. And there's a picture of one of my favorite things that you'll see, an old cracker shack that was somebody's house that used to literally grow oranges all around and fish, and the barges would stop and did commerce that way, and then it was a hunting shack after that. So every single trail that you get to, you can do a 1-mile walk or you can do a 10-mile hike, and you can learn about the culture and history of Citrus County when you see some of the things that are there, and when you read a little of what we wrote and then do things like the Historical Society. We have some wonderful writers who do the research and tell the story, and it helps you be proud to live here, and if you share it with kids and grandkids, it's another one of those things that helps them understand how blessed they are to be here, and maybe they should not leave. They should stay here and grow industries and prosper. The other thing that I want to talk about before we take about a 15-minute break is the Inglis Dam. This is an interesting thing. The Florida Barge Canal, there were 2 canals during the Franklin Roosevelt administration in 1936. They started to dig a 30-foot deep canal that was going to run essentially from Yankeetown. Port Inglis, which is out in the water off Yankeetown, was going to run to Denellen, from Denellen to Silver Spring, from Silver Spring up the Ocklawaha River to where we now have the Rodman Reservoir, and where the Ocklawaha dumps into the St. Johns River, and ocean-going vessels come there. The main purpose of it was to save 3 days of sailing around, and it was for national security after the First World War, when German U-boats played havoc with our commerce. The problem was that a couple of years into it, everybody in Florida that lives south of here said, we will have no drinking water. We will have no water for the agriculture if you dig 30 foot deep and you're in the aquifer. So fortunately, they stopped that project. But they had flattened a whole ridge, literally from west of Denellen all the way to Santos. They had knocked down the town of Santos, and on 301, there is a site you can see over there, not in our county, but part of our heritage, where there's 40 feet tall bridge stanchions and no bridge, and it's grown in. But Citrus County was heavily invested, and families gave that, and then when Lyndon Johnson decided, well, we could do a 12-foot deep when we could still move bunker fuel, the western side of our county, a lot of families gave up land, as they did from the levee side, and then in 1971, 50 years ago from when we started that book, Richard Nixon stopped that right after he started the EPA, and what's left is we have a lock that we share with Levy County or Levy County, but there's a boat launch, there's Inglis Lake, there is the Withlacoochee, the channels of the Withlacoochee, and there's a whole bunch of recreation. Besides fishing, there's hiking trails, that's a campgrounds. The county has 3 aquatic trails that run all the way along the shore of Lake Rousseau, and it's really hard to not wonder why we can't connect this with the next series of trails, why we don't have a museum of the Florida Barge Canal, and why we don't claim some of our heritage. There have been a lot of things that happen in this county that people just don't know about it, and not all of it's world-shaking, but some of it's real interesting. At this point, though, what I want to do is take a break. We have plastic-coated pages if people want to come around the table and just take a look at them. We've got some maps up here of the whole Barge Canal area, and we're I'm in a club called the Nature Coast Ramblers, and it's for big kids, and we do one bike ride together every month, and we do one hike together, and we do one paddle. And everybody, the people who were saying, why didn't you write the book, why didn't you write the book, said you need to go talk to Matt Clemens. And Matt Clemens was, at that time, he owned a store called Aardvark Kayak, and before that, and he'd had that store with his wife for about 14 years. Before that, he had been the preserve manager of Crystal River Preserve for 15 years, and his wife was the preserve manager of St. Martin's Preserve for 20 years. Before that, he was a captain down in Key West. And he was a certified ecologic guide, and they were strong advocates for that. He was famous for writing nastygrams to our county superiors and to everybody at the Chronicle. And above all, he was the real deal. So it was like, okay, you can't go do any of the paddling until you take my classes on safety. I'm not going to sign a contract to write the book with you unless you promise you'll always wear your life preserver, your personal flotation device, as it's called. And I don't want to see pictures where you don't even have a whistle on, because we need to teach people well. And coupled with Tom's art, they really were able to tell you how to get ready to get out there. For me, as a guy who started out as a navigator in the Air Force, the idea of tides and winds in the Gulf, it's terrifying. It's so much harder than flying, I can't even tell you. But Tom's also very gifted on software of all kinds, and so between them, we did a lot to bring that together. But we started out with the same idea, that there's different paddling in the Gulf than there are in the lakes or on the river. And our river, the Withlacoochee, probably most of you know a little about it, but it starts in the Green Swamp. There are two through paddle. So we talked about Sparky doing the whole Appalachian Trail, being a through paddler. We have a 140-mile trail that's called the Withlacoochee South Canoe Trail that starts in the Green Swamp, and 2/3 of it's in our county. It goes all the way through the Withlacoochee, and there are periodically and quietly canoe, kayak campgrounds or camping places. They're not campgrounds, they're 2 or 3 things, so you pull a boat out and sleep there and keep going. Once a year, Paddle Florida will do that expedition. It officially stops in Denellen, but to those that are hardcore, they keep going after Denellen through Lake Rousseau, across the Barge Canal, and all the way out to Inglis and Yankeetown. And there is also the Florida Saltwater Circumnavigation Trail that's like 1,870 miles all the way around Florida. And we are Section 7. Section 7 starts up at Cedar Key and ends right down south of Chassahowitzka. That's some serious paddling. That's the equivalent of the AT. And our section is particularly difficult because most places you have big signs, and you're outside cell phone range, so most of the software that people are used to on their cell phone or on navigation devices don't work. So we wrote about what parts of it you can do and what you can't. And then we wrote about the places where you can put in a kayak or a paddleboard or a canoe, and same thing, find parking, not get hassled, do a fairly long paddle. And there's about 24 of those. And this book is by far our bestseller, and we're on the third edition of this one.
And the reason that we have signs is because if you see all the green water, those are all parks. We're gifted with many parks that we got back in the 70s. But the parks would not allow signs in the wildlife refuge. So,
Yeah.
so when the signs stop right up around England, and they start back up below the national parks and the
Yeah.
refuge wouldn't allow.
Yep. Preserves and refuges that are federal, and they said no signs. And again, we lay it out by geography. The idea is also that these are bound books. They're plastic bound in a ring, and they're made so they will fit in the glove compartment of most cars. We call it a glove box gazetteer. A gazetteer is primarily a map book, and it's something navigators use, but it makes it easy. The same format that we use is before we tell you where to go, we tell you what you should know and what to do. So what are the different kinds of kayaks? More important, how do you do winds and tides and chop computation before you go out in the Gulf? Because from one day to the next, it can go from really smooth sailing to absolute terror. I mean, the waves may only be 3 feet tall, but if you're in a kayak that rises out of the water 9 inches, and on top of it, the periodicity of the chop, the waves aren't big, but they're just constant. It's an art you have to learn, and you have to have the right boat with you, and part of the navigation is understanding the signage on the navigable waterways, both the rivers and especially out in the estuaries and on the saltwater circumnavigation trail. And this was the first time we got to try out some drone photography being added to the books, which it's getting to be common now, but it's really nice to get what in the military we call the God's eye view, and that, you know, just when you look down on things, that's Chassahowitzka. That's the contract that the county has for a launch. It's almost everybody's favorite place to paddle. First, because the water's really clean. Second, because there's Seven Sisters Spring, which is the cover of the book. And you can, if you want to, you can dive into a hole and in water that's so clear, it's like there is no water. And there are several other springs along the way. And then there's probably the most fabled paddle in this county is called the Crack. And it's Baird's Creek. When you come out of Chassahowitzka, heading south-southwest back out, it's 7 miles before you get to the ocean. But 3 miles down, you go into a creek. And in places, you will have to get out of your boat and walk with it. And in places, you cannot turn your boat. And in all those places, there may be gators, there may be snakes hanging in the trees. But because we have enough people that go through, it's generally not a problem. And when you get to the end, when you get to the Crack is a giant spring, people take their turn, they stay for about 5 minutes. There's a tree swing, again, same beautiful clear water, and it's spring life. On the other side of the world is the Withlacoochee, and the Withlacoochee is a pretty wild river along our border. And Marsh Bend area is an outlet river that takes the water from Lake Panisovsky and dumps it into the Withlacoochee. And then it goes to a thing called Wysong Dam. And there's some things that we go only in Citrus County. And it's almost true. Only in Citrus County will you encounter the airboat flyovers that we have. A lot of folks that are paddlers don't like airboats, but when you get out in the outback, if you have a problem, it's only airboats that are going to come save you, and they pay a lot of money, so they're our buddies, and I don't care what anybody says. But those airboat flyovers are places where some of them, one of them in Flying Eagle, the bridge is too small for an airboat to go under, so they have a flyover that just stays wet, and they just power right over. It's a thing to see. There are several things at Wysong Dam. The first is our favorite pub. It's a thing called the Dam Pub, and it's a dam pub because it's at the dam. And it's got the friendliest bikers in all of Central Florida there, and a lot of good music and inexpensive beverages. But it's got this big flyover, and you see a lot of activity. It's south of 44, but there are, we try in our club, we try to do 5 to 10 mile paddles, and they take about 3 hours. And that's one of the favorite ones, where you'll either start at the boat ramp at 44 and go down to Marsh Bend or at least to Wysong and turn around. But at Wysong, you have to get out and portage your boat about 20 feet. There is a lock. Sometimes it works, but very rarely. Of course, for most citizens, folks are aware of Ford Island Beach. There is a real boat launch out there. There's a fishing pier. There is a a not-so-great beach, but it's the best beach we've got in this county, I guarantee you, because it's the only beach that we really got that's public. And they have just started putting in mats to make them wheelchair accessible to the beach. And hopefully that's the beginning of a movement where we're going to make a lot of what you see accessible, where we're going to start making, us old kids are going to start making a demand that scooters need to be able to go a lot more places. We need charging stations along the Withlacoochee State Trail, because we want to keep having fun until we're not walking anymore or riding anymore. But that is an excellent area to get out to some of the nearby islands, Shark Island, Shell Island, that in some places where the estuary is beautiful, you'll be paddling through tunnels that are so green. I mean, the light off both the water and off the mangroves is insane. And you're 2 miles from Fort Island Beach, just straight across. And some of them are nice places to just roll out of your kayak or canoe, sit on the beach, enjoy lunch, talk to your friends, and then come back, and you can see Fort Island across the way. It's also an area where almost every time you go out, the dolphins will be playing there. So you're paddling along, and they're paddling with you, and it's the kind of stuff people pay big bucks for at a vacation, and it's ours. Again, we tie back into the legacies of the Florida Barge Canal. There are two things that are out there, but the Port Ingles that was going to be this huge Gulf Coast terminus of the barge canal, and actually was a big port for a long time just because the amount of lumber that came in out of Levy County, and isn't there now. At the end of Highway 40 is a couple of things. There's a boat launch, there's a kayak launch called Redneck Beach, there's a park, so there's basically 3 places you could put a boat in the water. And the creeks up there, Bird Creek, they're bird rich in the winter especially, and they're very difficult to navigate in, easy to get lost in. So you want to go with a group or people that have been there. But again, you feel like you're on the Amazon River or somewhere, and you're literally 5 miles from US 19. So these are the where else but citrus counties that we were talking about. This picture down on the lower side is Inglis Lock, and in my life I lived by the Erie Canal, the Welland Canal in Canada, the C&O Canal in the Washington D.C. area, and I spent 10 years stationed in Panama over a 15-year period where I was doing tours because we were in the process of giving back, and the DOD owned that canal, giving it back, so every senator and congressman had to have a junket in a 5-year period. And we have a piece of history. They were building this canal in some ways to compete with the Panama Canal for a big chunk of the boats, the shipping that goes out west. And it failed, but it still left some pretty amazing cement. And that particular place right there, it's a 6-mile run from the Gulf, straight as an arrow. Can be a little bit boring, but it's a nice place to paddle, especially if you have the need for speed. And when you get right up to the gates of that lock, there will be manatees there drinking the fresh water that's coming out of the Withlacoochee River. They can't go through on this side. On the other side they can, but on ours they can't. Nonetheless, it's a beautiful place, and this is Citrus County you're standing in right here. This up in the top right corner is right over in Hernando before you get to the park, and this is on the bike trail, on the Withlacoochee State Bike Trail. And what you see is how trees grow back, how nature takes back. Once trains stop running through there, the trees grow all the way across. So you have this beautiful shaded tunnel, and we have miles and miles of this on the bike trail. So again, it makes it a lot easier to to relearn biking or get yourself back into just walking on a street that has no cars when you got shade like that. That below it is the flyover in Flying Eagle, the airboat flyover. That's actually the ramp of it right here, but it's a bridge over there. And Flying Eagle is down off the end of Eden, where Eden turns into Moccasin Slough Road. And let's see, that's in downtown Inverness, but it's right off the Withlacoochee State Trail, which is primarily bikes, and it's a really pretty diversion on a bike ride. On the other hand, this is in Potts Preserve, on the river trail in Potts Preserve, and it's the Cracker Shack I was talking about, and I was out there on Monday of this week, and it still looks like that. And nobody can document what the history is, but I've heard the story about the people that lived there in the 1880s that traded oranges and fish, and it makes as much sense as any other story I've heard, so I believe it. Tom, is the one up there, is that going to Jeep Cave? Yeah. So we have 7 or 8. We actually have a bunch of caves, but we have several plotted caves. They're not real deep caves. They're karst holes, but they're connected. Some of them are right off of Lecanto Highway, 9/10 of a mile north of Stagecoach. Jeep Cave is about a 5-mile hike to the almost dead center of the citrus track, and just above Jeep Cave there's a bat breeding restricted area, but that area in there is a cave not greatly dissimilar from the area under the balcony there, with just stones in the front, a large room, and the section of forest that you go through to get there. Especially if you go early in the morning, you see the sun coming through, and I spent a lot of my time in Panama and in Bolivia and in all kinds of jungles all over Central America, and it was like, I am home. And if you have a Jeep, or if you're not afraid to drive your vehicle down some of the forest roads, the FRs that are marked, you can get very close to that. I don't recommend it because the roads are terrible, but it is again a wonderful part of the county that not many people see or know about, and that is it's great bait for grandkids too. If you come down, I'll take you to a cave, or send you to a cave, as the case may be. So for us, we're working on a 4th book, but what we're about, this is, I'm on the county strategic planning committee. I've worked on the Citrus 2030, and I'm what they call a soft-core environmentalist. I've never been accused of hugging a tree, but I believe that the word conservative and conservation are inexorably joined, and that the wealth that we have in this county is not dollars, it's what Garth Brooks called unanswered prayers, development that didn't happen, and lessons that were learned that we can benefit from to protect what we've got, to grow wisely, and at the same time to protect these treasures of our trails. So we encourage folks to get involved, because there's 2 things. One of we brought up the Florida Barge Canal because it's the biggest boondoggle in the history of the state. Hundreds of millions of dollars was spent with no chance of ever being done. And that is not a new trick, and it's not a trick that's gone. But for example, we had some folks, I know they're honest men and women, but that wanted to put a $50 million bike path along Fort Island Trail that was going to be in 3 increments over 10 years. We were going to throw $1 million out of the county treasury and get $9 million from the state to take that bike path that's on a road that's too narrow for a truck dragging a big boat to go without dusting you off as it goes by, and end up with a $50 million trail that you still can't see the water, that's flat, that doesn't wind so you don't change what you see. And right now the only thing when you do see that you can see is a defunct nuclear plant or a gas thing that's there. So Governor DeSantis redlined that, but people don't want to let it go because there are folks that say, oh, construction in Crystal River, it's good for the county. Well, it's not good for the county. It's not good to spend money that's not a good spend, especially when we have so many other things that would be. So we just ask, take some time when you see these articles in the Chronicle. Take some time to talk to both our city council. They're really good people. I don't agree with them all the time, and they know that. And our county commissioners have a really good staff, and they're really good people. But they go with who talks in their ear. So if you don't speak up, if you don't say what you want, what I want, I don't know what y'all want, but what I want is things to change at a pace that we can stand and in a way where things are thought through, and what we protect is the good parts of the heritage that's here, the good parts of the earth that's here, and the way it feels. And it's not impossible to do. The reason I was in Panama for 10 years and went back and forth on the years I wasn't there, I was doing a thing called treaty implementation. And we were teaching the Panamanians how to take the canal and keep it running, and at the same time, how to do sustainable ecotourism, sustainable building, and protect their culture. We have a good culture here. It needs to be better defined. People need to learn history and be proud of what's good and not be afraid of things that weren't so good. But a little bit of activism goes a long way, and you don't have to be radical, but you're entitled to your vote and your ideas on everything, and you may find that when you express them, it really does good. Tom, you want to talk about the... you see, I'm a member of the Florida Trail Association. It is the citizen support organization which really does 90% of the work of that 1,400-mile trail. It's the folks that come out, and honestly, we have hundreds of miles of trails and only a handful of people that maintain them, and then a huge group of people, mostly from Tampa and from the greater Tampa area, come up here all the time, sleep on the ground, camp overnight, and trim the trees and paint the signs and do things because they think it's a great thing to do. There's a lot in that dynamics, but the citizen support organizations do a lot. I happen to be on the board of the Friends of the Withlacoochee State Trail, and it's a real fight to keep that bike trail resourced the way it is and in the shape it is, and it only happens because of volunteers. Fortunately, people all up and down the trail do volunteer, but we've had some real problems, mostly because of COVID and aging out volunteers. The folks that have been doing the work for the last 20 years, many of them are in their 80s and we're still doing the work, and after COVID said, I did my time. And we're having a hard time getting some of the younger folks out to do it. And sometimes just making donations helps. And then finally there's clubs. There's lots of clubs. We have a wonderful teacher in the Inverness Middle School that started a class called Outdoor Pursuits. Her name's Sharon Autry, and she's got a hiking club going that's right in Inverness. I'm waiting for there to be a couple of senior clubs because some of the young folks go faster than I can, and even faster than Tom can, and probably faster than Sparky can. No, not faster than Sparky. But so again, activity is important. Okay.
So I just want to go back a couple of shots. So on this, yes. So that's the English Dam Preserve there, the recreational area that we showed on the previous hiking map. And there's a lot of hiking there. But this is a really nice little park here called Felburn Park right here. And you can get onto this trail that goes out to the end where Max is suggesting we build a bridge over this area right here so that you can start here and go all the way. Well, actually, start here and go all the way. Go all the way. So, thank you. That's a great park. It's right up at the Withlacoochee River on that bridge that goes over to, what is that, Levy County? And then, so this was the canal from St. John's all the way through here. It was supposed to be a canal. But it also has islands that come out this way. And they're called the Spoils Islands because they took all the rock that they had to dig this barge canal out and dumped it in islands. So there's a little chain of islands there. So it really starts out here at the campsite. So what Max came up with an idea of writing a book about traveling from the spoils all the way over to the Buckman Lock up there at number 7, and then on through to the St. John's. Throughout here, this section, well, this is just the first part of the map. But in the middle section that we're working on right now, this is the first one, and we finished the last part of the book. Now we got to do the middle. There are a bunch of trails: hiking, biking, what do you call it? Bike motocross or whatever, mountain biking. It's beautiful. So we just recently finished this trek here, and this was the end going through. This is a working lock. This end, our end, does not have a working lock. They robbed this lock of most of the parts they needed to keep at least one of them working. So this one's working. It also goes out to the St. John's and allows the people on Lake Ocklawaha to go through and fish and recreate out on the St. John's and then come back in, and it's open 3 times out and 4 times back.
It's rated as the 3rd best bass fishing in the state, but it has the highest number of bass tournaments in the state. So it's, and those fishermen are environmentalists with a different view than the folks that want to tear that dam out. And it's a debate that's still playing and been going on for a long time. Well, so that's the book we're working on. That's what we've done. I'd love to take any questions that anybody has or discussions, because it's coffee and discussion. Anybody that wants to take the mic from me and say a piece on it?
What part of the Adirondacks are you from?
Lake George. But I left when I was 4. Yeah. I spent most of my younger years in the greater Washington, D.C. area, and then, like I said, I got drafted and didn't really go back to that part of the country. They cannot, because the locks don't open. So they go to the gate on the Gulf side just to get fresh water, because they're playful. On the other side, though, on that picture you see right here of us transiting, and this was like 2 weeks ago. We were just paddling through, and we waited a long time to be able to. It's not open all the time. It was closed because of COVID. But up on top there are some boxes that are sensors. They will not open those gates until they get a firm reading that there are no manatees. So the manatees can go into the Rodman Reservoir, and in principle can work their way down the Ocklawaha River. But on our side, right. And that's, again, one of the reasons that we have such a great congregation of them in Crystal River and in Chassahowitzka. Anything else? Okay, well, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for supporting this society, and God bless you all.